Item number 24, I'm sure will be a quick item. Approve the master services agreement for 5 years with options for 2 one-year renewals with Xerox State and Local Solutions, Inc. for voice and data network services, Scope 2. Extend the term of the Information Technology and Telecommunication Services Agreement with Xerox State and Local Solutions, Inc. In the form of Amendment Number 20. Approve Agreement 1 to the Master Services Agreement, County of Orange and Science Applications International Corporation for additional transition activities and make CEQA findings. This is an all-district item, and I know we do have public members wishing to speak. Madam Clerk, how many cards have you received?
7.
Okay. Would you please call the speakers?
All right, I'll call
3 at a time, if you would.
Okay. First 3 names are Jennifer Muir, Virgilio Furman, and Charles Guston.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm Jennifer Muir with the Orange County Employees Association, and I'm here today with a number of county IT workers to try once again to help this board understand the serious ongoing issues with the county's IT program and this specific contract. As you know, employees have been providing information to this board for years about how outside IT contractors continue to hold this county hostage with change orders and unfulfilled promises. Unfortunately, despite our efforts to help this board understand from the people who know about it most, who are the county workers, the county has ignored some of those pleas and made decisions that have cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. And it appears that we're headed in that direction with Xerox. First, they promised no cost increases when they submitted their last, best, and final offer. Then they broke their promise and raised that price by $26 million. And just this morning, I read in the Voice of OC that they threatened to halt services at the end of the month. Your employees have repeatedly warned you in the past about similar risky agreements with outside IT contractors, and I won't go through all of those today, but I mention them because today we are here once again offering to help the county not make the same mistakes of the past. So just to refresh your memory, I wanted to show a video that we played for you in 2010, warning the board that the county's property tax system upgrade was fraught with errors and destined to fail. It did, and as you know, the county is currently engaged in litigation to recover the tens of millions of dollars for a system that never worked. So if we could just play that video, and once again, thank you so much for your time, and we are here to help. We have copies for all of you.
It hasn't worked correctly. They're trying to modify a product that doesn't relate to what we do.
It frightens me to think what's going to happen when we're on the phone with taxpayers.
We were actually told in a meeting that regardless if we like it or not, it's going to happen, so we need to support that.
Staff is very intimidated by management. Everyone is running scared.
There's no control, there's no accountability, and we're facing budget crisis right now. I don't think enough thought was put into the new system.
The everyday users were not involved at all in the planning phase. One of the things I've learned is you have to talk to all of the users to get a broad knowledge of where you want to go with a program.
Do you believe the new system will produce cost savings?
No, quite the opposite. I don't see how it can.
Absolutely not. I think they're going to have to keep someone on full time to keep fixing glitches. I don't think it's going to improve customer service. I don't know how you're going to get any productivity out of the thing. What we have now is very user-friendly. It's fast. We can accommodate the taxpayer quickly. And I don't think the new system will provide that efficiency.
All right. Thank you. Next speaker.
Virgilio.
Mr. Chair and Honorable Board of Supervisors, good morning. I am Virgilio Fermin from HCA IT, and this month I am completing my 15 years of county employment. The county is taking a huge risk in awarding this IT contract. The contract is growing by tens of millions of dollars before it's been awarded. We as county IT professionals are the ones who are best suited to take on the challenges of the county's IT program. As we have seen in Orange County Public Works and with the voice over IP prototype at HCA, county staff can adapt to modern IT needs or do the project at a much lower cost than an outside corporation. We have the creativity, and we are accountable to Orange County taxpayers instead of to the shareholders. This gives us a unique perspective to understand the needs of the county and incentives to perform the work efficiently. I can tell you that my co-workers are ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work. Mr. Chairman and Honorable Board of Supervisors, please allow us to help. Thank you very much.
Charles Guston.
Mr. Chair and Honorable Board of Supervisors, my name is Charles Guston. I work for Orange County Public Works. I've been there for 18 years. County employees have demonstrated that we can do amazing things in-house, such as the Voice over IP project at OC Public Works. But we have an IT contract that is expanding by tens of millions of dollars. If I presented this type of work to my boss, I think we'd have a very serious conversation about my performance. As an IT professional with the county for 18 years, I can say that me and my co-workers don't just provide IT services, we provide a great public service at a great price. We can help protect the county against these type of cost overruns. We have already demonstrated we are the experts and can do this work. Why won't the county listen to us, to the public servants who are in the IT profession? Mr. Chairman and Honorable Board of Supervisors, let us help. Thank you.
The next three speakers are Joe Quintanilla, Angelo Lugo, and Eric, I believe it's Dalnes.
Mr. Chair and Honorable Board of Supervisors, my name is Joe Quintanilla. I work for the Healthcare Agency IT Department. Been there for 15 years of service. It is confusing to me as a county IT professional that county would rush to award a massive contract without first talking to the public servants who provide the service to see where we can do better. For example, work that I do as part of my day-to-day job would be charged per task by the outside contractor, costing the county significantly more. The county will have no choice but to pay for individual tasks related to IT services that are now part of normal course of business and are completely at no additional charge. This contract could end up reducing the level of service and costing more money. We are the IT professionals. We are the ones that do the work. Mr. Chairman and Honorable Board of Supervisors, let us help.
Angelo?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Honorable Board of Supervisors. My name is Angelo Lugo, and I am an in-house IT network engineer. I've been in the industry for about 29 years, with the county HCA for 13 and a half years. I'm a County of Orange IT professional, and I'm proud to not only provide IT services, but to also help the county in its original goal of delivering services to the taxpayer at a fair price. Watching this contract, I believe it exposes the county and its residents to unnecessary risks. When the county hands over control of its IT infrastructure to a private company, the county is more vulnerable to unexpected problems at hidden costs. Some examples could be power requirements, conduit, things like trenching to accommodate that cabling, things I don't believe that were even included. I want to continue to provide the county and the taxpayer with top-notch customer service, and I want to be a part of that solution. Mr. Chairman and Honorable Board of Supervisors, let us help.
Eric, followed by Nick Berardino.
Mr. Chair and Honorable Board of Supervisors, my name is Eric Dalnes, and I'm with the Social Services Agency, and for over 23 years of service. I'm an Orange County homeowner and taxpayer. I'm one of the many county IT professionals that have a unique understanding of the county needs, county IT needs, I should say, too. I want to be part of the future of Orange County IT. But once you sell the county IT infrastructure, we'll be at the mercy of the cost overruns and the contracting company who wants to make the money off the taxpayers. With this contract expanding by tens of millions of dollars, what is going to happen when we no longer have any control over the infrastructure of IT? Agencies have been able to make improvements in-house and within budget. IT professionals like me who work for the county want to do the same. Wouldn't it at least make sense to engage us, the people who do the work and who are directly accountable to the taxpayers? Mr. Chairman and Honorable Board of Supervisors, let us help. Let us help.
Nick Berardino, Orange County Employees Association, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Board. The video you saw, we played for this board over 2 years or 3 years ago. When I came to play that video, they said, the worker said, Nick, why are you bothering? The fix is in. The fix is in on this contract. It ain't going anywhere. I said, no, if we publicly show what's going on, because we had pleaded with this board on the assessor's contract, and I appeared here a number of times, basically told, forget it, everything's going well there. So we did that video in 2010 and showed you the employees who told you what you now have learned and how you've unfortunately spent a lot of taxpayer money and are going to spend a lot more money on a contract that the employees came and told you it's not going to work. You ignored them. The same thing is, and people told me the same thing on this contract. Why are you going up there, Nick? The fix is in on this one, too. And why wouldn't somebody think that? Why wouldn't they? First of all, you have a major contractor that perpetrated the biggest fraud on any public agency in the history of America. And they'll give you, I remember all the excuses you gave for that, which I thought was pretty interesting. Well, it's nobody else we can do business with. They're all involved in this. Oh, it just happened to be a few people there. But now they come to you and they say, hey, look, by the way, we need it. After you tell them you're going to have the contract, they come to you and they say, well, you know what? You got to give us more money now. Well, why? Well, because 120 days, oh, didn't you know? Those weren't calendar days. We meant work days. They don't even got the contract, and they're leveraging you. No, those were work days, not calendar days. You owe us more money. If that's not enough, and it comes from a group that has perpetuated the biggest fraud in America, $500 million, you're unconcerned about that. That's okay. It's fine. That's fine. We don't pay attention to that stuff here in Orange County when it comes to IT contracts, as you can see. And I'm familiar with IT contracts because Senator Correa started an IT group. And I was on it. And I saw the monkey business, and when we got close to the monkey business, it got shut down. Shut down cold. Tom Mock said, you ain't coming. He called me. He said, you're not coming back. And he said that to Eric Norby, too. You guys aren't coming back. And boom. And they say, well, the reason why we shut it down, we felt it was better for the board to handle. We don't want anybody else looking at this. We can look at all this. Just like you could look at what took place in 2010. And I'm not going to pay attention to it. If you want to get the deputy to take me away, I can. But these workers have every single right, after what's gone on in this county, to have a voice. After they've shown you and you've squandered millions of dollars because you wouldn't listen to them. You wouldn't listen to them. And that's what's going to happen here. Because then we have voice over IP. You already had county employees do it. They already did it. They did it in Public Works. Forget that.
Mr. Berardino, I know, look,
Call the deputy, it's fine, because I'm not done. You know why I'm not done? Because enough is enough, guys. We've all suffered with this stuff, and we're tired of it. Every county employee here, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Every employee feels like what you care less about them. I saw county employees up here, and I saw supervisors wouldn't even look at them. Wouldn't even look at their own employees talking to them. Now they're busy doing other stuff. Then Xerox comes. Now they need more money. No problem. Dish it out, baby. We got plenty of it. It's only the rest of us. It's only the working men and women of this county got to tighten their belts. Contractors and friends, they know contracting about. And then they put a gun to your head and say, hey, if you guys don't agree with giving us the more money, then we're backing out. And you know what? We're going to flop your whole IT system. We're leaving. I saw the letter. Letter's public.
we care about such threats, but
Well,
understood.
I think
All right.
we do. And then the
I don't.
We'll see.
Nobody's going to threaten me. So
We'll see. But
we will see, but in fairness, anybody can make all the threats they want. It ain't going to help them. And if you assume that Xerox threatening me or this board, that they're going to make some ridiculous, take their ball and go home, had any effect on me, it did to some degree, but it certainly wasn't to their benefit. But I'm being gracious because your members proved a point I've long been hoping to make, which is 3 minutes is not a target but a limit, and they all were very kind to stay within the well within the limits.
And you'd like us to, too. You know why? Because it's your bully pulpit up here, and the people that speak for the working men and women here who have been suffering, and there isn't anybody in this room who get it right in the neck day after day after day, and they have to come here and watch you with your contractor friends throw money out like it's, you know, and not only throwing money out, after they promise you, they stood at this very podium and promised you there won't be anything more. Yeah, till we get a gun to your head, then watch. And that's been the history, Mr. Chairman. I mean, that has been the history of the IT project by your own people, by your own investigators. And now, I mean, that's what this history is, and you're going to repeat it right here again. So out of respect to you, Mr. Chairman of this board, I'll sit down. Because it doesn't matter. I know it probably doesn't matter.
Mr. Berardino, and you matter.
But we only get 3 minutes, and now everybody else can, you'll bring the contractors up. They won't have the 3 minutes.
We've had
everybody,
more than 3.
and we're a signatory to an agreement for this work. And you should ask county council to look at signatory to a bilateral agreement and a collective bargaining agreement. In some jurisdictions, they're not limited to the 3 minutes because they're a partner and they're exclusively recognized agent, voted and elected by the members and your employees. But for that to happen in this jurisdiction, yeah, good luck.
It just did.
I have to sit down.
Roger that, sir. Just so we're all clear, the video was regarding the assessor's project, which is actually up and running. The property tax management system is the one that's not, and it's, by all measures, a disaster. Supervisor Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also wanted to also add to some clarification of some of the comment. One is that the company that is defrauding or so-called $500 million is actually not Xerox, it's SAIC that was mentioned. That was the other contract, which I made my comments then. And so, and second is there's also a couple things that I want just to remind everybody and the public. Is the IT committee, the dissolution of that was actually, I was the one who came to this board and asked for the dissolution of that committee. I was tasked to be the chair of that committee or to be on the board, and I found that through numerous meetings it wasn't productive. There wasn't any comments, or there was just, there were things that were done there that I felt that, this is big enough that the Board of Supes needs to be engaged, not just committee members, one supervisor, and actually two supervisors, but the one never shows up except me. And so I figure that we move forward and bring it to the board and we dissolve that committee. And in that committee, though, from that is what you've got before us in the last few years is, with my initiative, working with Supervisor Bates later on, is we got the performance auditor to audit the IT system. And we've actually advanced ourselves in terms of where we are in IT, what we looked at, and some of the comments that were made that, this could be done within our county employees. You're right, it can be. But the one thing that was in the audit that was not mentioned is that the department are overcharged for each of these items that were costing the departments more. So we were billing 2, 3, 10 times more than the actual cost of these IT services to the county departments. And I looked at it as, hey, we're a county family. How come we're being charged? Because at the end of the day, what was told to me and to this board in this IT audit report is that somebody's got to pay the bills for the IT. Well, okay, so you're going to go charge me more when you got the bulk rate and we're in-house? So that's one of the reasons why we went forward with what we're doing. The voice over IP, I've talked about the voice over IP since I've been on this board, well over almost 6 years now. I felt that we as the county need to go forward and actually look at voice over IP. And that's when Public Works and then also that's when we found out Public Works and Community Resources were putting together their own system. None of the departments wants to come together and get a bulk rate together. It is too expensive for them to do it together versus separately. And so the voice over IP, I've mentioned it before, it is efficient, cost cheaper. We cannot continue to go forward with the landline system in some of the departments we have. And so what came out with the IT committee, and Mr. Berdino was a part of that before I was on board, was reevaluating and seeing the cost of the contract and where we can save money and what area we can't save money. So I just want to make sure that we have all those comments on record, because those are, I just don't want one side of the information has been filtered today. And so since I was involved in the IT committee, Mr. Chairman, I want to make those comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Mr. Patel, are you available to answer some questions?
Honorable Chairman, board members, Mahesh Patel, CEO IT.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Perhaps you could start with just help me understand what net effect, if any, it trickles down to the employees as far as positions. Do we lose some? Do we gain some? Do we move them around? What happens? If we were to approve the scope too.
Supervisor, as has been stated in the past and as has been put together in an agreement with the union, if there are going to be any impacts, we will ensure that no employee loses a job. This was committed to before. We sat down and with OCA and worked through the process to deal with anyone who is going to be impacted. We have talked to agencies like the Sheriff's Department to hold positions open so that we can address any impacts to staff. We will be, we are still waiting on approval of the contract before we can take any action, if required. And at that point, we would be engaging more directly with the unions and the staff who may be impacted. But we have made provisions to work with both the unions, with the departments who have available slots, and as a kind of a final contingency, we have asked even both our vendors for Scope 1 and 2. We do have a requirement in the contract that at least that if we ask them to interview somebody, they will do that. They don't guarantee employment, but they will at least do the interviews. Again, that's more of a last resort. So I think we've made every effort possible to minimize impact.
All right. Is your department just done some sort of analysis as to which portions of Scope 2 we cannot do in-house? I mean, help us understand the concept of using an outside vendor versus just rolling through the various aspects of Scope 2 and doing them all in-house.
Sure, Supervisor. One of the things here is you know, in this sort of a, at this juncture, we had to look at if we're going to be going out and we have to do something with the existing contract, the existing services, it's an opportune time to look at the entire space in the county, see what's going on in the county. And there's a recognition, as Supervisor Wen has stated, that we need to do something with VoIP. And we also recognize that with respect to just the county network as a whole, it has grown somewhat loosely, somewhat organically. It was an opportunity to look at it as a whole, have a single provider help design it, redesign it, make it more effective, more efficient. There's technologies that allow for removal of redundant equipment, things like that. And, you know, you have situations where agency A and B may be neighbors, yet they're not sharing circuits. I mean, we could reduce costs by doing those sorts of things. But we do need expertise. You know, we're talking about well over 200 locations in the county, 15,000 plus handsets in the county, plus the networks that themselves that move the data. So why go outside? We really need that level of expertise. At the end of the day, in terms of managing the infrastructure, once it's up in place, the contract has, I think, very, very tight provisions in terms of keeping service levels up, maintaining the equipment, ensuring that there is capacity and uptime. You know, today these sorts of things we take for granted, but they really require, for our size and scope, particularly when we're talking about things like security and meeting compliance, we need a good, solid partner to work with us.
All right, and if I could switch just to costs of the current proposal, I have at least before me, as I understand it, and maybe you can follow, is there's $14,700,000 that the staff believes since the last best and final we've added additional work. Actually, there's a couple $1 million that we've reduced some stuff, and then we've added stuff back in. But what I'd like you to focus on is there's $12 million worth of requests to be added to the last best and final price that, at least as it's been explained to me, staff believes was originally part of the scope and just was not added in.
Yes, Supervisor, if I may explain that. As we were going through the final negotiations, there were 5 areas that the vendor and the county really we worked on to clarify, to ensure that our stated needs were met. These are not really new items added by either of us, either us or the vendor, but there were some assumptions that had been made on both our parts, both the vendor and us. And through the process of negotiation, you know, we reached a conclusion that these specific areas, at least a good number of them, really were tied to where the risk lay and where the responsibility lay for provision of for these specific areas. And with respect to governance, you know, we did add $14.7 million worth of additional scope, call it scope. One of the big areas we need to make sure is that the law and justice organizations, their networks have the level of isolation that they need and are designed to support their needs. That was a stipulation that we had agreed to with them. And as we went through this process, there was a recognition that it would take an additional resource to ensure that that happened. And so the vendor has added one service delivery manager, bringing the total of service delivery managers to about close to three individuals. So that was the additional, call it governance-related item.
All right, but so that we don't get lost, and I apologize that, you know, I assume everybody can follow me, but, I'm looking at a sheet
Yeah.
that you provided, and not everyone is. If I understand correctly, there's been a manager added because we expanded the scope.
Right.
So everyone agrees you got more work to do, you need another set of eyes overlooking this. But the price, as I understand it, for the 5-year contract is a tick under $1.4 million, and that'd be awful pricey for one manager, at least in my view. So what's the difference here?
I believe they've also added some resources with respect to some of the other areas in terms of security operations, and then we did add additional about 59 voice sites as well. So, some of it is related to that.
Right, but we have a price for those. In your mind, at least as to the governance, is this something that's new because we added work, or is this a tag along from the old contract?
I think given what we've added, it does make sense, to have some level of additional oversight on the part of the vendor. This endeavor is certainly not without risk, and we need to make sure that.
Well, we knew that going into it, though.
I agree. But some of it is as we start elaborating more and more, there's a recognition that it's probably a little more than they expected, or more than they expected. So.
All right, well, we've been at this for 2.5 years. I assume everybody's got their head around the expectations, or maybe they don't, but help me understand. We reached the last best and final. It was $133,541,000. That was back, last fall? That's for the 5-year final pricing.
The 133 million, which is really what we've bringing before your board, I think we reached at...
The BAFO was what, 106?
106.
Okay.
So that was in November. We came to your board in November for that.
Okay, so you start negotiating with them when? January?
February.
Yeah, given the Christmas holidays, we probably didn't start in earnest till January, yeah.
And help me understand, final price 106, we start adding scope. Aside from the added scope, what's the highest number that this 106 grew to?
As we were going through negotiations, I think it hit around the 160 range.
All right. And what happened to take the $30 million out? And this is what I'm asking. At 106, I realize if we're going to add scope, we're going to pay for it.
Yes, sir.
No one questions that. I mean, it's been 2.5 years since this proposal went out. That's completely reasonable. Mm-hmm. But this price is being proposed at $133 million, and 90 days ago or so, it was $160 million. What was the other $30 million?
Supervisor, some of it was related to these specific items that we've covered in the 14 million and the 12 million, the 26 million, the specific items themselves, and those were priced higher than what we eventually negotiated down to. So they priced some of those things higher.
Well, Mahesh, my concern is this. I don't want to send our staff on a wild goose chase. Every time we've got to have a discussion about something that we add or some issue comes up, mm-hmm. we're right back in the same discussion about, well, I'll ask for this and maybe you'll ask for this and we'll meet in the middle. Mm-hmm. I'm tired of that. I mean, the statements that we got, I realize you can't pigeonhole, but if I go back to November when I had Xerox executives, I mean, I can quote them, and I will. Mr. Davis, I don't know, Mr. Davis, I don't remember his face. Maybe he's here today. The simple answer is no. Our price will not change. The procurement was based on a level of service, as Mr. Patel said, and the head count that we decided to include in our bid was a function of what we thought would be necessary to deliver that service. I mean, I realize you can say anything you want, but I just want some comfort that I'm not constantly chasing a vendor around, because my appetite for that is zero. I just don't think, you've heard from our employees, you know what we're used to around here. We've got Tata that came in, clearly way underbid, did not nearly have the staff that they needed, but they got their hooks into us, and now, now we're having to take them beyond the woodshed. I mean, enough of this. We just want a price. We don't want misunderstandings. We had years of question and answer. This has been going on forever, 2.5 years, almost the whole time I've been here. Actually, it has been going on the whole time I've been here, because it predates me. I don't want change orders unless we bring up something new, and there's plenty of new things to do. I don't want any change orders, ever. I didn't want to hear about a change order. And what I'm looking at is, after years of discussion, well, we had to clear something up. I've got an item on allocation to cover work orders, transformed circuits, for example, $6.4 million. Now, there is no way that, looking at our original scope, a proposer wouldn't have assumed that we had to use somebody's infrastructure to get to all our remote locations. Right. Yet, what was the number of at least the reasonable assumption in this bid?
So
it was zero, right?
Because the assumption was that the county would be responsible for those circuits as a whole,
right, but
on their part.
It's a $6 million item.
Right.
6% of the whole contract was an assumption. I mean, how much time, well, how many questions were responded to by the staff as part of this procurement?
Several hundred.
And 6% of the entire contract was just an assumption that never got addressed by anybody till now.
So, Supervisor, that specific $6.4 million is a cost that we would incur one way or the other. Either
Right.
we do it or the vendor would do it.
Clearly.
Okay, so
Just so everybody understands, it's Time Warner or whoever has,
right.
I assume, fiber optic to kind of connect to these remote locations.
Right.
Somebody was going to pay for it.
Correct.
So we're not getting an additional cost, because no matter who our vendor is.
Correct.
In-house, out-of-house, everybody's going to have to pay. My concern is, how are we getting to this point? And for the first time, well, we are going to have to include this in a price. I don't understand, with sort of the robust discussion that's taken place, how that one falls into the we assumed, you assumed. That scares me a little bit.
And I understand, Supervisor, circuits specifically are, frankly, vendors go either way in terms of how they take on responsibility for that. They can choose to let the client handle it, or handle it themselves. We did have a desire to at least be able to. One of the key principles that we wanted to follow is that, you've heard the term "one throat to choke." Really have them responsible for the entire delivery of the service.
Right.
And they came back.
It's another thing to have an RFP.
Right.
And everyone reads the RFP and hopefully reaches a similar conclusion. So, irrespective of what we desire to happen, because that might just be our own internal thought process,
right.
What did the RFP require when it came to this particular item?
We did ask for, in general, we asked for vendors to clarify. In terms of the solution, we did ask for some. We were pretty flexible in solutions. In terms of some of the responsibilities, we were pretty explicit about, certain things you're going to be responsible for, certain things we're going to be responsible for. I should say also, with respect to circuits, we do have some circuits that we own today that we would continue to allow the vendor to utilize. And so they would not be on the hook for that. Now, there may have been some confusion with respect to that, but as far as the final contract is laid out, it's explicitly laid out that in terms of financial responsibility for what we own, it's us. In terms of what they own or what they're responsible for, like Time Warner and whatnot, that they would be responsible. So they could have possibly, I'm speculating, but there may have been some confusion around that.
But did the RFP require that a number include access to all these circuits? Did we, what did we ask for?
We did ask for a number, I believe, as what's called a pass-through. And a pass-through is basically whatever the cost is you give to us, and that's it. We get it at cost.
Okay, and in this particular contract, was that just left blank?
I think they gave us a number, but they didn't, they just assumed that we'd take on that cost. It wasn't specifically laid out in the line item. As we got into negotiations, I think that's where we got the clarification.
All right, Supervisor Nguyen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mahesh, thank you. Actually, first thanking you for going through and diving through the detail of this with myself and my staff last week when we continued the item, or when the item was continued. And so I just wanted just to kind of help everybody and myself. And I know that we've had this discussion already, and we went through quite some, documentations with my office. And in regards to the circuits and subs that the chairman has talked about. Actually, no, let me back, before I get to that, Mahesh, if you can. So we're talking about $106 million at the baffle. Today, we are at $133 million.
That's correct.
But of the $133 million, $14 million was specifically new add-on requests by the county.
It was an ask by us, yes.
Okay, so then we're really looking at 106 to 120 20 million then, because I'm going to set aside that 14 million.
Right.
Okay, so we're left at about $12 million
That is correct.
of questions.
Sure.
I guess the first question I have is, and I know that we've gone through with this during, and it was actually prior to me being on this board, during the IT committee, that the IT committee looked at, if the county were to do something like this, what would be the cost saving to the county if we were to collectively do it ourselves and or to subcontract out? What is the cost to us versus, or is there a cost to us more, or is there a savings to us?
So when we were doing the estimates with respect to that, in comparison with the bids that we got, the final number we were looking at is about a $32 million less cost going with Xerox.
Okay. And then the second bidder
Yes.
to this system, if we were to go with this contractor today at 133, what is that compared to the second bidder?
So the difference there is about $37 million.
Okay. Now, going directly to the circuits and subs, if we were to tell Xerox today, we'll bear the responsibility of that 6.4 million, then can we knock it down then?
Well, we're going to...
I'm asking you, is that possible? I'm not asking you for your opinion on whether you would recommend that or not.
We can't knock the number out. We still have to pay somebody the cost for that.
I understand that, but
Right.
we won't be paying Xerox. How's that? We're going to pay somebody, but we
Right.
won't pay Xerox.
True.
So in terms of the Xerox contract, if we took that 6 million and we're going to pay somebody else for it,
Right.
whether it's hiring a few more staff or whatever it is, or hiring another company,
Right.
we will bear that burden, right? And we
We-
won't pay Xerox.
We bear both the burden and then take on the risk as well.
And I want to add to that is that, as you know, Mahesh, I've been quite critical of our IT system for the last 6 years. So I appreciate you and your staff and for your patience in helping me through this process. One of the number one thing that I've talked about, and actually it goes with what the staff has mentioned here who spoke earlier, is the change orders.
Yes, of course.
And I made a comment in our scope 1. I actually was the one who voted against that item I actually think there are changes that were made that weren't included. I was very vocal. I voted against that, and I think, and I believe that in this particular one, you took my concerns to heart, is don't come back to us, whether it's this current board, these board members or future board, don't come back to us and ask us for a change order. So if we didn't include this in now, in the language, set in stone, do you, I mean, we will have to pay for it regardless, but do you anticipate if something does happen in the future and no one bears the responsibility, this 6.4 million can be more because of litigation costs?
Well, Supervisor, that's the idea behind managing risk. And so, you know, we'd rather, I mean, it just, practically speaking, when someone is responsible and to meet service levels, we don't want to get into a finger-pointing game. If something does go wrong, there's always going to be issues. You can't avoid that. And when they do occur, we want to be able to say, Xerox, it's your issue, you deal with it. I don't want, whether it's Xerox or anybody else for that matter, a vendor, it becomes their thing to resolve. It doesn't get into a finger-pointing game where, oh, well, it's them, so you need to deal with them. We really want it to be pretty seamless, and I think that's how it should be. You know, when you have Time Warner cable at home, Time Warner may have God knows how many providers that they use to provide support to you, but you just deal with Time Warner and they fix your problem for you. I'm just using that as an example. Similarly, I think this is fundamentally, at some level, a utility service that, you know, we want to hold a single provider accountable for. Yeah. And there's a price to that.
And one of the things that we talked about in our meeting that I use as an example is that we have a pump station in Los Amigos, and we're in litigation because it was more like well, you bought the pump station, well, it doesn't work, well, it's the manufacturer's fault, well, but it's not, you're the one who did it, and so now we're in litigation of, we're not sure whose fault is it. Is it the installer, is it the manufacturer? And so this is now not bearing that burden on us and not having us sue multiple individuals. We are now forcing this on to this contractor.
Yes.
Can you go through, there's 3 other areas that were talked about that are part of this 5. I know governance was talked about, plus the circuits and subs. Can you go through the other 3 and explain to us how those numbers came about and what happened?
Right. There's a provision called deemed work orders, and this really is a contingency that amounts to about $125,000 a year. Each order is no more than, I believe, $25,000. And what this allows us to do, in any situation, you may have this keeps small work items in scope without us having to do amendments. It's just a practical way to keep operations going so that, you know, if an agency is moving, 50, 60 people, we need to have a mechanism for them for the provider to take care of that. And contractually, we set this up as a dollar amount, not to exceed a certain amount per instance, so it's manageable. And so that we don't have to go through a long, drawn-out process to get the work done. And when we had put this out there, Xerox basically said, well, we don't think they basically made in their position when we got into negotiations was, we don't think you should do that. And they had their reasons. But it's not uncommon for folks to do this. It's a real practical thing we really need to do. We said, no, you really need to do it. And, we set the dollar amount, and that's really where this number came from. So
that is basically their professional opinion or advice to us is separate from what we want in terms of our professional opinions on our side.
Exactly. And at some of these positions, obviously there's a lot of things that were negotiated up front. And several sessions, countless sessions really, about going back and forth through each item. At the end, these are some things that we said, really, we have to hold our position with respect to some of these, because again, from a practical point of view, from a point of view of risk, I don't want to have to come back to your board saying exactly what you advised me against.
No change order?
Yeah, exactly. So, that's really what that was seeking to address. The transition period, again, we had stated in terms of business days versus calendar days. Calendar days, they understood it to be business days. But I think regardless of it, I mean, even when we were going through negotiations, there was a recognition on by both parties that, initially it was 90 days, and then we had actually gone to 120, but we have set it to 175. And frankly, it is probably a more realistic number overall. When you consider not just taking over our networks and working with all the different agencies and so on and so forth, and that's a lot of agencies and 200 odd locations. Practically speaking, and as you get into this, it's a more realistic number, and I think it just makes sense. Again, frankly, some of this stuff may have popped up later.
Now, if I remember, a year ago almost or more, I've suggested to you to actually do the transition much longer, and staff at the time said, no, we're okay, and you kept on coming back with, with asking to extend more and more until where we are today. And so this is really taking into consideration of, again, no change order and that we need a smooth transition. And by the 175 days, I'm assuming you have thoroughly looked at this, and that would be much more flexible. It could be less, but you have now extended that a lot longer so that we have that opportunity.
Yeah, it gives both sides some flexibility.
And then one more item.
Oh, pardon me. Yes, with respect to depreciation, we have an assumption of at the end of this deal, and really this is a 5-year contract with 2 one-year extensions, optional extensions. But from a cost point of view, we basically said that really we want to recover or pay off any of the equipment costs within 5 years, as opposed to 7 or even more, depending on when the equipment goes into service. But from a pricing point of view, from a contract point of view, we said that, say they leave at the end of year 5, we would have the equipment pretty much free and clear there. We wouldn't have to write off a big check at the end. Now, that again goes to our bit of a conservative posture that we take. And, we just didn't feel that we want to be sitting at the end of this deal writing a big check. We just want to recover or pay off whatever we need to through the life of the main contract. If it goes on 6 and 7, then we won't be paying anything with respect to the equipment depreciation at that point.
So if I understand it, that the $3 million cost is already included, is just that because you have a 5-year contract, and if the future Board of Supervisors decided not to renew the contract or take on the 2 option years, year 6 and year 7, we want to own the system free and clear, so that meant you move that $3 million over. Instead, if the future board decides to take on that option, the 2 options, year 6 and year 7, that $3 million is part of that, and there's no writing a big check at year 7.
There's no, that $3 million. There's no part of that $3 million left over after year 5, really.
So the option for the board today, after you've explained that, go with the current contract proposed by staff, save $32 million. In addition, save another $37 million if we were to go with this company versus the second bidder.
Yes.
Or go with this I would say option B, go with this contract, get rid of the $6.4 million, take that money, pay somebody else for the work. And then also the depreciation, change this contract to a 7-year contract versus 5 years. You're essentially shave off $9.4 million of that $12 million concerns here. option 3 is not to do anything and stay where we are. That the 3 options you gave us, kind of, not that you want to. I know that the 2 options you don't like. I know what staff has proposed. I get it, but I just wanted to be clear what the board's options are.
Yeah, I mean, the board has, those and probably more options, but yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Supervisor Bates.
Yes, Mahesh, I think what was most troubling to me in this morning's discussion was comments from our county employees, and I was one of those not looking directly at them because I was recording all of their commentary. There's a theme here that they were not included over the course of time in the discussions regarding moving to this outsourcing. When I served on the IT committee, one of the key complaints early on is that governance of IT was top down. We restructured governance for your division so that you would have employee involvement. We have a lot of expertise. These individuals have actually put on the record their years of service in their various departments as IT professionals. So I'd like you to respond, and I think it's very important for them to hear from you where they were included, why they have these feelings today after we've been in this 2.5 years that their voices were not heard. Because I'm looking at a sheet you provided us. If we were to go in-house with this, I've heard that you do not think we have the creativeness that is out there in the industries that are creating the new systems, and that the cost is significantly more based on a sheet you gave me. Was this during that governance and supposed, what I was assuming, employee input into the whole process here for 2.5 years, what were you listening to, and what were you putting into the numbers that we have here so that the decision we have to make goes to bottom line, expertise and cost, and trying to get the best so we don't have another situation that they've all mentioned, and it's accurate, that every time we're in one of these IT things, we have a new expanded cost. I remember one of the contractors standing up there, and I specifically asked them a question, if we added $5 million to this contract per request, will you deliver on time and what was proposed? The answer was yes, and it didn't happen. So you can see where we all are. This is an extremely difficult decision to hear he said, she said, and then try to make sense of the numbers you provided. So I'd like you to start with talking to me about where employees were involved, why you've determined that the expertise, that specific creativity that you've mentioned, we don't have. It's not to demean them, but we all know, that we don't have some Mr. Google working here, and, Steve Jobs and all the people that have really made this all happen. Those are different folks, but we have some incredible expertise here in the operations, I'm assuming. But take a few minutes and tell me about 2.5 years, where employees were involved, how we came up with these numbers that show a very, very significant difference in cost, but perhaps not if we're going to deal with another, I only need $5 million more and it'll be okay. Because you can get there when you have a $42 million difference here between county doing it and having a contractor do it. It doesn't take many $5 million add-ons to get up to that, and maybe we would be solving the issue of a very legitimate concern that we all share, job loss. And you have promised to the greatest degree possible we will not see that, but a lot of issues there that really need a discussion on the public record.
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor. With respect to participation in this source or the selection process as going through this, we, in terms of the technical folks who are reviewing these RFPs, we had folks from different departments involved. We had one of the key people from OC Public Works who was involved in developing the VoIP solution, be part of the review team. We had somebody from OC Community Resources who was who led that effort there. He actually went with us on the site visits. So I'm just citing a couple of examples in terms of who was involved in reviewing the proposals, in talking to the vendors, in talking to what the capabilities were. And the technical review folks came back and said, these specific solutions are solid, they're good, the technology is good. With respect to, internal versus external expertise, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not as if we don't have very talented individuals in this county. But here's the thing, is that with something as extensive as this, we would still need external resources to do this. Part of the solution offerings, I mean, we were pretty, like I said, open and flexible. Vendors have the, you've heard about cloud, you've heard about things like that. Some solutions are designed in such a way that the vendor can manage them from their data center and be more effective because they just have equipment and monitoring capabilities that they can spread across several clients and still do it in a secure manner. So we wanted to have as forward-looking solutions providers as possible, because this is not a static environment by any stretch. And in terms of resource management, we need some of the flexibility to bring in resources as needed. Although we have county staff today who are very capable, I know that agencies still use external contractors for some help that they cannot provide. So, I mean, it was a consideration really tied around the complexity. And I don't want to take anything away from folks who've done really great things in the county. But this is a pretty significant undertaking.
Chairman, he's misleading the board. Hate to speak out of order, but once again, the taxpayers are being lied to. Put it on the record. He is misrepresenting facts.
Any other questions or comments?
No,
Supervisor Bates?
I hear him. No,
Supervisor Morlock, do you wish to add to this?
I'd like to ask you, Mr. Patel, you've come up with a price that it would cost if we did it internally. What is that? What is that price?
Just one moment. And this includes both doing the work and managing the ongoing infrastructure. Over a 5-year period, our estimate, and this includes the equipment as well, getting the equipment and any other fees. The Xerox is, well, and then we would have to retain, even under the Xerox deal, we would be retaining county staff because that's what we said we would do. It would be 163 versus 195 million.
Versus 195. What does that mean?
It would be 195 if the county were to do it.
So it would be 195 for the county to do it. It would be 171 if Verizon did it, and it would be 133 and a half if Xerox did it.
That's just right, but there are other costs that we have with respect to licensing and all of that we have to factor in there, besides the contract that we would still be responsible for. So all told, and those costs would be applicable whether it's done internally or externally. So it would be 163 if we were to bring in all of those other costs as well.
Okay, so if we stripped out what would have to be applied to all three,
right,
then it would be 163 versus 133 or 171.
It'd be 163 versus the 195.
Well, I'm talking apples to apples. In-house would be 163. Xerox as negotiated is 133.5, and Verizon as bid was 171. So those are my three numbers.
Here's, John, these are the numbers that I'm working from, because I got that.
Yeah, no, I'm just want to get it on the record. Because I'm showing that the BOFA, BAFO, was, in November of 12, Verizon was 171. And
Correct.
then Xerox was 107, roughly.
Correct.
And then they added 26 to bring it up to 133 and a half. And so we're saying if we did it internally and we put a bid price on that and we compared it to these two bids, doing it internally would be 163.
No.
No.
That's what I'm trying. You
Yeah,
understand what I'm-
okay, let me walk you through this
Okay.
real quick. Okay. Xerox's cost was 133. Let's just compare Xerox. Their contract price is 133, right? If we were to do this with the county and then the ongoing support as well, it would be
195.
195.
So we're saving $60 million by retaining.
Well, there's still a cost that we have to incur, that if we were to keep Xerox, keep in mind, we're still retaining county staff, so we need to factor that in. We also need to maintain license and contracts and other things that would add up to 163. So really, when we're talking about total costs, it would be 163 versus 195. So the difference is 32 million.
So
Mr. Chairman, can I chime in?
please.
Supervisor Morlock, what Mahesh is saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is with the 195 cost to the county, if we were to do it in-house, there's several components to that. Licensing, we have to do that regardless of whether it's in-house or out or contracted. So that plus the management, which is the staff, installing it as well, and also the equipment. That will come up to $195 million. Now, the contract before us is for Xerox is $133 million. Where the difference between 133 and the 63 is that we still have to license all the programs and everything anyways, regardless of how we do it. So it's about 20 million difference, because that's part of our licensing of these programs. That's where Mahesh came up with the 163, because the 195 already includes the licensing part of it. So if you subtract 163 with 195, that comes out to the $32 million difference, because this was part of the study that was done prior to, actually during the time when the IT committee staff worked on with Averson and et cetera. So the difference is contracting out or in-house, $32 million. Then if you're going to compare Xerox to Verizon, it's $37 million.
Correct.
So it's 195 million versus 163. So we're saving 32 million in the 5 years, according to the staff's data and information they've given us.
And it is conservative in the sense that under the Xerox arrangement, it assumes we're really not impacting any county staff. We are retaining county staff as well. So that's factored in as part of that cost. So that's why that number goes up with respect to even staying with Xerox. So the delta actually could grow, but we are being conservative.
Okay, so then you've gone through a 2.5-year winnowing process. Has been very lengthy. You've analyzed a number of bids. We took it down to the final two. We've gotten our BAFOs, and you've negotiated with the Scope 2 top most responsible bidder. We've got something before us. You've got some odd communications. I think some of the criticisms that have been made are justified. It is a little awkward to be arguing about what 120 days means. It's also a little awkward to discuss what a renewal means and how it's worded. Some of the correspondence has been awkward, but we've been utilizing Avasant throughout the entire process, so you've had someone independent monitoring your activities over these last 2.5 years. And we invited the grand jury to be participants too. We said you can be in the room and monitor as well, right? I think they decided not to use current members, but volunteered former members. So we've had a lot of eyes on this whole process. You've worked hard. Christina Kozlowski's worked hard. Casey Rostenberg, and I could go on a long list of.
It's a comprehensive list, Supervisor.
Okay, so I just want to thank you for all your hard work. This has been a pretty difficult process, and I thank you for providing us with an option today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Supervisor Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mahesh, the question that Supervisor Bates asked in regards to the process, and there is a common theme here that staff felt that they were not included in this process. Mm-hmm. Can you go back and remind me, because I vaguely remember it. I remember part of the performance audit report was that there was that criticism, but then when going through this the last 2.5 years, or actually 4 years now, there was the time where, and if you can be more detailed than what you've stated, having the Public Works and Community Resources who did the voice over IP, just the two individual. But if I remember, you had a lot of group sessions. You met with a lot of the staffs around the county and going through with all this process. And that's why, so I want to make sure that we understand. And I remember Supervisor Bates and I were very, very adamant that you made sure that we include the staff in their comments because of what we've seen and what we heard, even with the video in 2010.
So when we put the scopes of work together,
Your unhappiness with what's being stated may or may not be shared by everybody in the room, but the floor is not yours, sir. Seven speakers. All right, Ms. Mahesh.
Supervisor, getting back to your question about participation in this process, we had established some governance around IT, and part of that involves every IT department and the IT management staff being part of that process. As we went through this process, we invited every agency to sit in and review the scope of work to make sure the scope was covered. We also, when the bids came in, we had sessions with each of the IT department folks. It wasn't with line staff. It was with the folks who are responsible for providing services in each of their departments. And they went through it. They made sure that in terms of the scope, at least at that point, they were able to opine on it and say, have you considered this? Have you considered that? They sat in on some of the presentations that the vendor made. We had actually held them in this very room to make sure we could accommodate them. So, with respect to how we approach this, we did get input from the IT departments.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but this is a democratic and taxpayer service. It's only with outbursts that you get the truth that line staff weren't involved. That's my point, sir.
Any other questions? Mahesh, I have a question. It's just global in nature. If there are any savings to be had, my concern is that the price that I have, I'm struggling to understand what it means anymore. I don't know how to calculate what other vague terms are in this agreement. I don't know how to calculate what other misunderstandings may have conveniently be either left out or unbridged at this point. And I don't want to get in a relationship and see one change. I don't want to see one. And I don't believe that's possible right now. We've had enough.
I understand.
All of this discussion is about vagaries. I don't know what last, best, and final is for, if it's for coming up with another $24 million or 26 in charges. Last, best, and final means something different to me. And I guess what I'm struggling with is, if last, best, and final doesn't mean this is the last price we're going to accept for this last scope of work, then what does any of this mean? I mean, we don't have a savings if this price starts going up. At best, if all the information, best we can calculate it, is accurate, we might, and there's some moving parts that weren't included, we might be saving $32 million. But of course, we have $14.7 million worth of new scope in this agreement that wasn't in the earlier estimate to do it in-house. So I don't know that these differences in price really mean what they have been purported to mean. But if there's $6 million in savings per year, if that disappears real quick with change orders that are on the magnitude already in front of us, or discrepancies, I got $12 million worth of discrepancies after 2 years of question and answer. Why won't I have another 12?
Well, Supervisor, keep in mind that this effort, getting to this point, was to really, at some level, solidify what the actual scope of work was. So there would be a lot of discussion around what's in or what's not, how many items are covered, and how county's business needs have changed, and that's all factored in over this 2-year period. We don't expect, we expect that we've covered significant, if not all, the ground necessary for them to move ahead and take on responsibility. We've identified pretty much every circuit, every device out there. We've estimated or worked with them in deciding what they're going to need to do for transformation, and they've priced that in as well. It is getting down to, a level of detail through each step of the process. And, we wouldn't be coming to your board at this juncture if we didn't feel that we've covered, there really isn't further ground to uncover.
All right, well, my last question. With regard to the $12 million, it's been represented to me that $3 million of that is because at the end of 5 years, we don't want to have to write a check to get out of the contract. And that the vendor originally had not priced that, although it's been purported to me that the RFP required that be the case, that we have no payout, that it costs an additional $3 million. What I'm having trouble understanding is, if I read your chart, you'd have to have real good eyesight, but this is yours, that it'd be a $3 million change even if our agreement, we exercised the 2 options and went to 7. And that I can't reconcile. Because if the explanation is, yeah, we're trying to help you, dear county, and we don't want to charge you in 5 years that which may not have even been installed for the first 2, but at the end of 7 years, we'd still have a $3 million increase in price, according to your chart.
I should clarify that, and if I understand what you're saying, you see $3 million in year 5 and year 7.
Yeah, and I'm not counting it twice.
Okay.
But I understand if the acceleration was not going to be done in 5 years.
Right.
But how could the acceleration, if not done in 5, not be some lesser number over 7, with the thought being we just wanted a longer payment plan. So after 7 years, the buyout certainly couldn't be the amount at 5, because under everybody's assumption, we'd be paying every year. So I can't reconcile how they'd be 3 million off and it's just static. We're always 3 million off. If you make your car payments for 48 months versus 7 months, every year that goes by, you pay it down a little bit. So if we were off in the assumptions, fine. Right. You used 6 years, I used 4. But at the end of 4 years, you can't be off by the same amount as being at the end of 6 years. No one would calculate it that way. And I don't understand how it's a $3 million upgrade either way.
So, and I'm probably not the best suited to explain that schedule, but there was a schedule that we had laid out where for every year that it actually went from year 1 through year 5, and basically said that if we terminated the contract in any of those years, what would be the residual value?
Right, and the number would get lower every year because we would have paid off a portion.
Right.
And this $3 million at the end of 5 years, I'm not happy that was left out because I think the RFP was clear. However, if it was left out, it was left out. But the information I have is if we continued our option for years 6 and 7, it'd still be $3 million to get out.
I don't believe that's true.
Then why did you tell me that?
No, if I wasn't clear on the table, I should be. That's why the amount says 3 million for 5 and 3 million for 7. Basically, what 6 and 7 would be 0. So at the end of 7 years, it would have been a total of that $3 million.
Mr. Chairman, if I can interrupt, I asked the same question. Staff has a chart that you're looking at. I'm assuming it says 5-year change is $3 million, 7-year change is $3 million. I questioned staff that what it should say is 5-year change is $3 million, 7-year change is 0. It's not $3 more million.
No. Listen, for all you finance experts in the room, and only for you, let me assure you something. I'm not double counting it. But if you pay over 7 years, your net payout ain't $3 million anymore because you've paid 2 more years. And I would think that if you didn't amortize it over 5, you at least amortized it over 7, which would mean not only is it not an additional 3, it's actually less than 3. It would be a negative number because you make payments for 2 more years. That's the way financing works. If you pay 2 more years, then the number isn't 3 million anymore. It should be -3, but it isn't. If I want to pay my car payment, because everyone can relate to this, over 4 years, but instead I pay over 6, at the end of 6 years, I owe less, not the same as after 4 years. So we're not double counting 3 million. 3 plus 3 would be 6. But if we went 2 more years in this contract and the assumptions were appropriate, then that number should be, after 7 years, it should be less than 3 million because whatever the mistaken assumption was has been cured. The 3 million is to equalize someone saying, I assumed you'd stick around longer. And now we're saying, if we do stick around longer, what benefit would we get from your false assumption? And the answer apparently is nothing. Actually, there is no benefit. You pay $3 million no matter what. That I can't reconcile.
Okay. Mahesh, if I can, the $3 million we're talking about are the equipments. We want to own those equipments. And so we're not talking about the management side of the contract.
Of course, it's just buying hardware.
The hardware itself. So explain what you explained to me in my meeting is that I don't have that data, but you had like per year on what the cost would be for those equipments for us to actually, it's kind of it's like the chairman said, a mortgage. So instead, we can amortize it 7 years or we can amortize it 5 years. Right. So you just divide, say if it's $10 million, you divide that by 5 years or you divide by 7 years. So, explain how you explain it to me in my meetings with you, because at the 7 year, there's no cost because we've already paid it off, the equipment itself.
Right. The decision was to pay off the equipment either in 5 or in 7. they made the assumption that it was going to be 7 and even beyond, because some equipment's life was, say, starting in year 3 or year 4, so they pushed it out on a 5-year schedule. We said no, just under the conservative assumption that it's going to be 5 years. That delta was $3 million, right? So they moved that $3 million up from the outlying years, 6, 7, and on, up into the 5. So I think to answer your question, Supervisor, that $3 million is really the year 6 and 7 amount pushed up. So, you know, you're saying that if it was year 6 and 7, if we stayed on 6 and 7, there would be a certain residual amount that we would pay. The total of that, I believe, is the $3 million. We're just saying that, you know, we had a certain amount to depreciate over the life of the deal that included year 6 and 7, totaling $3 million. We're moving it up to the 5, and we're done with it at that point.
Let me just take one last chance
Sure.
to rephrase it a different way.
Okay.
If we used their schedule and not ours, there would be 0 change, right? The answer has to be yes, by the way.
0 change, yes.
If we use their schedule and not ours, it's not a change. So then there is no increase in price. There better not be, right?
Right.
So if we use their number, what was their number, 7, 8? I mean, whatever their number is has to be a 0 somewhere. So what was their number? If we stuck around for 8 years, it was 0? 9? It would have to be 0 at some amount of years. No matter what schedule they use, they could use 30. But some number has to be 0 for them. What number? How many years do we have to hang around to pay no additional fee?
I think part of it would be tied to when that equipment came into service.
Of course it would be.
So-
And the question is, assuming that, what was the number? Because you don't get it both directions.
Mahesh, the answer should be 7, because the option.
Well, it would be 7. I'm just looking.
But apparently it wasn't. That is mathematically my problem. Because if we just hang around 7 years, there shouldn't be a change order. But according to this, we'd pay an additional $3 million no matter what, which means they didn't actually bid it that way. They couldn't have included it in the cost if there's an increase, whether we stay the 7 or the 5. So I've convinced myself I don't need to convince you, sir, but I got a $3 million problem. And I don't demand magic. Let's just leave it as I got $3 million I can't account for. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, this is an all-district item. Any preference?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I just wanted to, again, going back to what Supervisor Morlock mentioned, is what I'm seeing in front of me and what staff has provided to us, and we have to base our information on what staff has given extensively, especially in the last 2.5 years, is I understand you're $3 million apart, but what I'm hearing from staff is if we were to do this, if we were not to do anything today and not approve this contract, it would cost us $195 million in the next 5 years versus $163 million. So if the staff here today can tell me where we're going to find $195 million to spend versus $163 million, because the system needs to be upgraded. We have to do something to the system, and I've said this over 6 years ago, or 5 years ago now. Given the VOF lawsuit, and you know, that's $76 million annually that we're losing potentially, I'm trying to, for me, my question is 195 million, 163 million. Where does the taxpayer get more benefit? Saving $32 million or the $3 million discrepancy that you're talking about? and we can start over. If you can persuade me and say, we ought to go with the $195 million, I'll go for it today. Let's go with $195 million. Help me find the money. Help me find the other $32 million. But to find $3 million you're talking about and cost $32 million more, I'm trying to understand that. So I appreciate your comments. So if you can help me, what is our solution today? Go $195 million in your suggestion, spending $32 million for $3 million that you are questioning, or and basically do nothing. That's what is to go in-house, do that, or go with Verizon and start the negotiation with Verizon. It seems like with SAIC, there was over $30 million. And trust me, your comments is what I said with SAIC. And we saw where that went. If we go with Verizon, it seems like anytime we bid during this after BAFO, there is going to be changes, whether it's from staff or clarification. So if they're at $171 million as of November of 2012, are we going to stay at 171, or are we going to go above that? It seems like the trend tends to go above after BAFO. So I'm left with 133, which ultimately 163 versus 195. I would go with staff. I would go in-house if we have the expertise and the $32 million more to spend. You help me go for that, and I will support you. If you make the motion, go in-house, $195 million. I'll second that motion for you if you make that motion.
Well, if I understand the question, the premise is that there are only three options. The problem is I don't agree with that, and it may be that to do this exactly the way it's laid out with staff, I don't know whether it be the $195 million or not. The problem is that's not our only alternative. I, for one, don't have a problem making phone calls from my office. I believe that what I've been told is the headsets are harder and harder to come by, but if we convert one department of 1,000 people, I probably have more handsets than I know what to do with the rest of my life just from that one department. We'd have our own inventory, basically, even as it ages. So AT&T has delivered every phone call made to me so far, and I don't have a complaint from my staff that we have something going on that we need for telephone calls. I do believe that with the healthcare agency, there's probably going to be a significant increase. There may be some areas that need to be changed, but I don't know that this scope is the one I would implement. I mean, that might carry this discussion on a lot longer, but I'm not for $195 million, and I don't think that has anything to do with what I would like to see come out of this. Among other things, perhaps Xerox can clear up the $3 million with staff. Perhaps they can't. That certainly should have been done before now. But it doesn't insult me that Scope 2 may or may not be partially broken into subcategories. We know our staff can do voice over IP, at least for departments of about 800 to 1,000 people. We know that because they've already done it. I asked staff. They don't have any complaints about that. SAIC does cybersecurity. Maybe that portion of it just stays on the contract we already have that already has hourly rates. I'm not suggesting that, but it's an alternative. Building a network is the part that is probably more complex, to build a unified network. And frankly, if we were going to do that and it were up to me, I would just prefer that these sophisticated vendors read the darn RFP and give me a straightforward price without all this shucking and jiving. Had they just done that in the first place, I wouldn't be having these comments made from the dais. But I didn't get my wish. So I don't propose $195 million. I think the budget ought to be $133 million. And I'd like someone to explain to me, with a fresh look at this, whether we can get what we want, however it's delivered, if it's partially through staff, partially through the Scope 1 vendor, and partially through a much more narrowed RFP. I don't know. And I don't want to know. I'm not a computer engineer, and I don't profess to be. But I don't like what I'm seeing. And I'm not going to get nickel and dimed in a process that what I keep seeing is a bunch of nickel and dimes being drug out of me. It's not appreciated. I'm not under a misunderstanding. And I didn't fail to ask the right questions back in November. I tend to use more colorful language. I just don't do it from the dais. But, you know, don't try and snow me. Because this number, and I want to make sure everybody understands, the innocence lost is when we were in negotiations about 90 days ago, this number wasn't $12 million of added extras. If that's all it ever was, I probably would have gotten over it a long time ago. That's not what it was. It was like 30 million extra. And then it got pared back down to 12 for the same scope. I can't reconcile that. And the only time we made any progress on that additional clawback, is what my words, not anyone else's, is when I brought up to, you know, staff suggested, well, maybe we should enter into negotiations with both vendors because they seem awful close in price at this point. And only then did we make this rapid progress, this sort of retreat back to $12 million. Man, that's not the way to do business. You know, other than if you're under the threat of being compared to competition, do you actually get wise with your price? I don't need that. Our staff doesn't need it. I assure you, my colleagues don't need that. We want honesty from the get-go. You know, not hide the pea under the walnut constantly. I don't have the stamina for this game. And I certainly don't have a desire to keep track of the missing money and who's coming back for another couple $1 million. I didn't create this. This would have been real easy. Just give us a last, best, and final, all of its new scope, and that's it. Anybody with my limited expertise could have given an estimate for the amount a Time Warner would have charged the entire time. Could have couched it as an estimate. We didn't put a number in. We have to pay for it anyway. I understand it's $6.4 million. It's just irritating because it was unnecessary. So Supervisor Wynn, I appreciate your question and I understand it, and I don't mind the idea of working together with the whole board, with staff, but I am not happy that we've gotten pigeonholed into thinking our only alternatives are 195 million or the 163. I don't believe that. And so I'm not suggesting, nor would I make a motion to do it in-house for 195 million bucks. I don't think it's necessary. I just not, after 2.5 years, I'm not ready to bite this apple and just say we've resolved it. My gut, and it's only my gut, tells me that based on the way these things are moving around, it isn't going to be 163 million. It's going to be something else, to be defined. Any other questions or comments?
That soliloquy was lovely.
All right. We do. Supervisor Bates.
I just want to put my thoughts on record. I'm not totally comfortable with the $12 million add-on as a result of the $14 million. That's how I simplify it. I think more work needs to be done on that. I'm not comfortable with our employees basically saying that our CEO, IT CEO, doesn't provide a total truthful commentary. I think that's another one of the innuendos that's very troubling, that has put a cloud over the county and this board, basically unfair. If we're really a family, we should be working together and not creating divisiveness that everybody gets to have an opinion of. It's become a wonderful gossip game. And with a contract as important as this in terms of providing present and future services that benefit not only our taxpayers but certainly our county family, I think we need to have a little more discussion on the couple of items. I would agree with our chairman that the $3 million issue is one that we need to understand better. I do believe the $1.4 million additional management that Xerox is saying they need to put into the contract now that there is this subcontractor requirement. We need a little more, understanding, a little more transparency on how we came up with those numbers. It's the value attached to the requirements that the county now has based on the $14 million additional requests that have troubled me from the outset. I'm going to say I'm 60% there, or maybe 70% there with the explanations of that. But it's a big contract, many years going forward, and many of those years I will not be here as I term out next year. And I don't want to leave those who will follow me with the kind of difficulties financially in IT that we've been left with and had to make very difficult decisions. That's where a lot of this suspicion and innuendo derives from, and I'm not prepared to pass that on to those who will succeed me. So I'd like us, I know it will cost more money, but not a lot in the scope of $131 million that we're looking at, that we take some more time if we have to extend a few contracts. We need to do that, but we need to get to the bottom of these. And I think most importantly, we need to get to truth, because innuendo is driving so much of the discussion, and I'm glad we've had this one today, because it has to be fact and truth on the record and not what I consider to be totally inappropriate accusations about our county family. If you care about your line item, your line staff, you must care about your managers, because they worked a long time to get to that position. So with that, I'm not prepared to vote on this today. I think we need to do a little more work, and we need to come together in deciding that we're going to accept Xerox proposal, or we're going to take another direction, or we're going to divide it into two smaller components. That's where I am.
Supervisor Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mahesh, can I ask you a question? It seems pretty clear that there needs to be more discussion with staff and understanding, and you got to have more clarification for us in working with Xerox on this, the $3 million discrepancy. My question, and I know that the chairman mentioned this last week, if we don't approve a contract today, is there a contract that we have to extend? If not, should we then look at that part of this ASR and set aside the new contract so that we can continue on with our service system, and then bring this back later?
Supervisor, we would need to approve the one recommended item with respect to the extension of the existing Xerox contract.
Which one is that?
The item for you.
You have 4 recommended item. Which one?
Yeah.
Is it item 3?
Yes, Supervisor.
So we can ignore 1, 2, and 4. Item 3 specifically extending our current system so that we can have a more robust discussion for the new contract.
Yes, Supervisor.
Is that right, Christina? She's
Yes,
nodding.
yes, 3. I'm just double checking.
Okay. So, colleagues, what I would then propose is to recommend just the recommended action item 3, so we can extend the contract, and then have direct staff to go back, negotiate whatever they need to do, and they've heard enough comments from this board on the $3 million, i.e. $12 million problem we have here. I then would recommend just recommended action item 3.
I will second that.
All right, not to belabor this, Mahesh, what are our alternatives? Who provides is this for telephone service? Something else?
Supervisor, item 3, the recommendations for item number 3 is actually for current ongoing services at the data center, as well as the voice and network. So it's ongoing services that we provide through Xerox.
And what are our alternatives?
At this point, we would need to, the contract really ends tomorrow, so we don't really have very good alternatives at this point. I mean, we could.
Assuming they're not particularly attractive to you, knowing when the contract expires, my question, sir, what are our alternatives, irrespective of how attractive they might be?
We have a contract with SAIC. We've not begun transition. We'd have to work with them. They'd have to be amenable to fast tracking. We would technically need to go into some kind of disentanglement with Xerox with respect to handing off services to another provider.
AT&T?
We'd have to have a contract in place ourselves with AT&T. Currently, they're part of this Xerox extension.
Well, all right, and it's been referred to, but we received a letter July 23rd that says, you know, Xerox submitted an offer to extend the current base contract. You know, their offer to extend is withdrawn. Now, I understand there's been a lot of chatter in the meantime, but I made the statement earlier, and I meant it. Nobody's going to intimidate me. You want to take your ball and go home, pull that nonsense. I don't understand what the motive was. I don't care. I don't read into it. I accept it for what it is. They want to play us, which is what that was, and then sobriety or something set in, and they decided what? They wish to now suddenly retract that retraction?
I believe I think it's best that they explain how they, what their reasoning was behind
What's
that.
the status? I'm not questioning the reasoning because I'm not going to get I mean, I know what the reason was. They can say whatever they want.
No, I mean, you know, we did.
What's the status? Has the retraction been retracted?
I believe so, yes.
Well, actually, you believe so could get us in a lot of trouble. Do you know one way or the other?
Well, in looking at their follow-up letter, I think they agreed to work with us on continuing with the extension. Am I mistaken? That's correct. So they were amenable to moving ahead with an extension.
Do we have to extend it?
Do we have some understanding as to how long the extension is available for, if it's really available? Or, I mean, do we have to negotiate that?
The amendment before you calls out an extension through February of next year.
Is that terminable at any time, or it's just a fixed extension through February?
I think we can terminate with notice, if I'm not mistaken. The conditions are the same as the existing contract.
What is the notice requirement? Because if it's 6 months, that would be till February anyway.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's that long. Is it 6 months? It is.
Imagine that. That's luck. I want you to know. I didn't know before asking. Okay. Supervisor Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since you've spent a considerable amount of time discussing the $3 million, and you've bought several cars in the meantime, do you want to have someone from Xerox get up to the podium now and explain the $3 million? No. All right.
Supervisor Bates.
A question regarding the extension. Can we extend it for a shorter period of time to allow us to have, let's say, 30 days to vet a few of these items? The extension through February is $8 million. It kind of blows $6 million in the additional add-ons to the county. Kind of adds on to that if we eventually go with this. So my question is, and I think this would be for Mahesh and perhaps Christina, is it possible to extend it for 30 days so that we can, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down in 30 days instead of waiting for 6 more months to kind of go through line by line?
From our perspective, yes. You know, Xerox would need to be amenable to that.
Well, then I would like to amend our motion to a 30-day extension to allow us additional time to get to bottom of the 3, what I consider to be, certainly to me, the 3 critical issues that have been brought forth into discussion today. The veracity of whether line items and managers were part of this for 2.5 years, whether the 2 items on the $12 million line item sheet are accurate, and how did we get those values? And when I get answers to that, I'm going to be more comfortable with a vote to move forward with this. If I don't get comfortable, I wouldn't be there, but at least they would have the opportunity to get us back together and decide if this is where we want to be going forward, or we want to do an in-house or another combination of components.
Understood.
So I would like to amend that motion if the maker, being that I'm the second.
I'm fine with that, Supervisor Bates. Do we need to ask Xerox, is that okay with them to do 30 days?
I think we'd have to ask them.
Can we verify, would you accept 30 days if you're here? Can you just come up forward and tell us who you are so it's on record and that you do accept us extending for just 30
board
days?
members. Mark Talbot, Group President for Xerox. 30 days is fine with us.
Okay.
Allow us to clarify
Great.
some of the discrepancies here today.
So I'll amend the motion to 30 days extension instead. So then the recommended action, Mr. Chairman, will be is for item just number 3 for August 1st, 2013 to September 1st, 2013?
Well, we have a meeting on September 10th or August 20.
Okay, August,
September 10th.
September 10th, because that's 30 days. So then this item will be back to the board.
It's actually about 40 days, but
So then this item would be back to the board in September, the second meeting?
It's actually the first meeting. We don't have a meeting on
Okay,
September
yeah,
3rd.
I'm looking at county council, so whatever the legal, you need to tell us what is required. So then this item will be back to the board first week of September, and that extends this contract for 30 days as of tomorrow, because that's the contract ends tomorrow, right?
The board meets August 20th and September 10th. You have 2 weeks off in there, so it should be about 40 days through September 10th.
Okay, then 40 days to give us to September 10th?
Yeah.
Would that be okay, Supervisor? Okay, so we'll extend this for 40 days. September 10th, this item will be back to the board.
41 days.
I'm not sure it's exactly 40 days, so we want
Well,
to
okay.
just through September 10th.
Through September 10th. Let's just not say exact numbers. September 10th, then.
Perfect, thank you.
All right.
all right, we have a motion to continue this item to September 10th, and we have a second.
And extend the contract to,
We actually can't move that. All we can ask is that staff work with Xerox. We can't move their action. They would have to agree to that, and
they just did.
I understand, but we can't move them to agree. They can say whatever they want. He could leave this room and not agree. I mean, he would be dishonest if he did that, but we couldn't legally stop him. We can't move an action by Xerox. It's not within our board's jurisdiction.
Perhaps the motion could be amended to authorize staff to enter into a 40-day, or an extension through September 10th with Xerox.
Okay, then that's the motion.
There we go.
And brings us back to September 10th for the board. Continue to September 10th as well.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any opposed? Opposed. Passes 3-1.